Have you doubted your ability to heal? Have you felt discouraged as you've navigated this journey? If so, you're not alone, and I hope that today's video helps. Hi, welcome. I'm Peggy Oliveira. Well, if you can relate to that, you're definitely not alone. This process isn't easy. It takes a while, requires a tremendous amount of patience and courage. I've talked about all of that many times. But today I wanted to talk with you about this kind of in a more specific way as a result of a conversation. Well, really many conversations over the years, but feeling discouraged about the process of really any type of sustained growth or change, and particularly emotional healing, is challenging. You feel like you can make progress. You get all these kind of aha moments and you understand, and maybe you even are doing things differently. And then you find that you struggle again. And that can be really discouraging, disheartening, and even quite hopeless at times. But one of the things that comes up quite often in particular is the idea that people feel really discouraged or feel like it's really not possible for them to heal because of the work that they've done previously, or because too much time has gone by. The idea that you're too old is something that I've heard from many people over the years. And the interesting thing about that is I hear it from people who are like in their early 30s even. So it's really not about age, it's just the idea and the hopelessness that comes along with really the fear of maybe healing isn't really available to you. So I wanted to share some thoughts about that to help you see it maybe in a more realistic way, because you're never too old, it's never too late. And all the work that you've done, whatever work that has been, even if it's just been getting to this point in your life and not really doing any specific healing, it has all helped you on that path. All of it. Because you've learned stuff about yourself along the way. You've started to recognize patterns. You notice maybe how you react to certain things. Now, some of you may recognize that really significantly, and some of you maybe not so much. But even when you do really recognize it, it doesn't necessarily mean that you've been able to really do much about it. So that's also part of the process and why it takes so much patience with yourself and the process to heal. So most of the people that I've worked with over the years have done some sort of healing work previous to working with me. And much of that has been that they've been in therapy before. And for some people, it maybe wasn't therapy, but they read a lot of books around abuse, around healing, around self-help types of things. They've maybe done like a retreat or an inpatient thing. Maybe they've talked about it a lot with their friends. But they've done things that they really felt were part of their healing, yet find that they still struggle. And this is normal, but again, discouraging. So whether it's actual therapy focused on healing or having conversations with friends or anywhere in between, even if you're still struggling, especially if you've worked with a therapist, it doesn't mean that the work that you did before didn't do anything. It doesn't mean that it was a waste of time. In fact, rarely is that going to be the case. Now, sharing things with a friend, reading self-help books, that is all beneficial, especially if your friend was supportive, because there's connection in that. There is hopefully the release of some shame. there is sharing your story and owning your story. So even if it didn't really seem to make any sort of positive difference, as long as you were met in an appropriate way, there is healing that can happen in that, even if you are not aware that healing happened. It plants a seed for the work that you do later on. And that's what I really want you to take from this today. All the work that you've done, the books that you've read, the podcasts that you've listened to, the therapy, the coaching, whatever it is, everything that you have done that has helped you gain insight, maybe even heard something that didn't quite feel right to you, and so you thought, no, I don't think that's true. That's getting you closer up that mountain. Because every time that you gain insight into what you think and what you feel, what is really true for you, that is connecting you more within. And so much of this healing process is about our ability and willingness to connect within. So a lot of what I hear is that people have been to therapy and they're still struggling with the same things. Sometimes they even struggle a little bit more. And then therefore feel like either it was a waste of time or it proves in their mind that they're not capable of healing. Sometimes it's both, but it's definitely not true that it means that they're incapable of healing. Because even if the work that you did was specific about healing from trauma or interpersonal violence, something really significant in your life, even if that's what the focus was, and even if you did some great work during that time, but you find that you still struggle, you still gain something from that experience. It's quite possible that during that time, maybe you needed to be in a place where you could share certain things, but maybe you weren't really ready to take it in. Because we need to hear things many, many times. We need to experience the uncertainty and then the safety and the doubt and the assurance. We need to experience all of that many times over time in order for it to start to shift what's happening internally. So all of that, there's value in it. And I know that people can often feel so disheartened by the energy, the time, the financial resources, and of course the self-doubt that comes when you feel like it didn't work for you. That makes it harder to feel like you want to do any more going forward. So really recognizing that the things that you take, that they are steps up that mountain is really important. When you're reading a book or you're listening to a podcast or watching a video and you have that aha moment, or you find yourself thinking about something in a different way, being open to hearing something in a different way, obviously that is significant. That propels you a little bit further up the mountain. And the truth is that there are times in our healing process, and this is true for really any sort of growth and especially therapy, we can hear something at one point, sometimes even after you've been on the journey for a while, we can hear something and maybe we actually disagree with it, or maybe it just doesn't quite really register. We don't really internalize it. And then, for whatever reason, months later, maybe years later, you hear the same thing again, same exact thing again, and you feel it differently. You internalize it at a much deeper level. Suddenly, it's like it all comes together. That happens because of everything that happened up to that point. Really, if you think about it, how many times do we need to really hear something before not only we have that aha moment, because sometimes the first time we hear it, that can happen, but how many times do we really need to hear it again or repeat the idea, feel into it before it actually starts to shift something? There have been so many times that I've worked with clients and had conversations where we've talked about something and there's been something that I've shared with them, and sometimes it's a week later and sometimes it's a year later, and they'll come back into a session and tell me this thing that they recognized or that they learned or that they heard somewhere, and it's the same thing that we talked about a week earlier or a year earlier. And in the beginning, honestly, there were times that I felt like, what? We've talked about this. And not from a place of anger, but just like, what am I doing wrong that it didn't register in the beginning? I let go of that a long time ago because I saw it happen so frequently that I realized what was going on. But that happens because we hear it and that seed is planted. And then we hear something similar again and it's watered. Or maybe we hear something that's actually somewhat contrary, and that can be kind of this push. We can push against it a little bit and feel like this resonates more now because you recognize this isn't true. So maybe this over here is a little bit more real. Anytime you're reading something or even journaling and you identify something, you recognize a thought, you recognize a pattern, you recognize a dream, even if nothing really seems to shift in that moment, even if you try to counteract it by coming up with all the reasons why it's not true or real or whatever, that moment of awareness with it, that presence with it, especially if you feel that possibility in your body, it begins to take root. And then everything that you do after that, that has any similarity to that at all, it nourishes it and it grows, it expands. So your consciousness, your awareness, your felt experience with it becomes more significant over time. So the idea that you've done all the work and it's not done anything for you. And I know how that can feel. I've been there too. But it's not really true. You may not be able to really feel like you've got anything tangible that you can grab a hold of to prove that it's not true, but it's there. That seed has been planted. It's been nourished and watered over time. And eventually it sprouts. And even when that initial sprout happens, you may be able to ignore it. You may not even notice it. But over time, it continues to grow. And that is what this healing process looks like. Even if you're lucky enough to find somebody that you work with initially and you keep working with that person and it's a beautiful experience. That doesn't all happen in the beginning, right? It happens over time. As you continue to practice vulnerability and connection, as you practice sharing yourself, as you practice just generally doing all the things that are required as part of this process, all of it gets you further up that mountain. So anything that you've done to work on healing, anything that you've done to bring awareness to the struggle, the reality of your experience, what it means for you, honoring the truth of your experience. All of that is moving you in that direction. And so the more that you do it, the more that you practice, the more depth there is to the work that you're doing. I've worked with people at times that I was their first therapist, and whether we worked together for just maybe a couple of months or longer than that, maybe even a year or so, and then for whatever reason, they moved on or I left, they hopefully have continued to work with somebody else. And so they may feel that their time with me wasn't really beneficial in the long run. But hopefully those seeds were planted. And the work that they do later, in whatever that looks like, they will be nourishing those seeds. And they will be starting from a place where that foundation has already started, even if they don't feel the sturdiness of it, even if they're not even sure that it exists. That is how this process unfolds. And even when we have had really, really great, really meaningful experiences that have been healing, there's still more work beyond that, because integrating those beautiful healing experiences is part of the practice and part of the process as well. And an example of that is in retreats that I've led. So generally, when I have led retreats, people come together before the retreat happens, and people start getting to know one another and connect in a private space, virtual space. And so the relationships start building, they're practicing connecting and vulnerability. And then when we come together, it's incredibly powerful, incredibly healing, incredibly vulnerable. It's all of that. And I say that based on feedback that I've gotten, so it's not just my perception. But it's incredibly powerful. There's so much depth of healing that happens during our time together. And there are a lot of reasons for that. But then we end and everybody goes back home. And that can be really challenging for people, because you come into the space, you allow yourself to be vulnerable, you share sometimes things that maybe you've never really shared before, especially with a group of people. There's so much that comes up, so much feeling, so much connection, so much sisterhood, and it's such a beautiful thing to witness. Really one of the most powerfully healing experiences I think that people can experience, because it's so compact in that short period of time, and there's so much that happens. And then they go back to their lives, and it can be so easy for that to feel lost, but it's not. It can feel that way because there's a disconnection from all that you were wrapped in, and then you can feel exposed in a way. You can feel alone. And so I often encourage people to make sure that they have support. Ideally, they're working with a therapist so that they have the ability to continue to experience that type of connection, that safety in a relationship. But the work that they do during our time together, that continues long after our week together. Everything that they experience during that time, as long as they don't shut down, it continues to be integrated. They continue to feel into that sense of safety in their body. that recognition that vulnerability, while it can feel really uncomfortable, doesn't have to be a bad or negative thing. That there's so much beauty that can come in that vulnerability. And they continue to practice that over time, long after the retreat ends. And that is the continued integration of that experience. So the same thing happens, whether it's, again, a podcast that you're listening to or years in therapy. All of it matters. All of it has been something to help you get up that mountain. Even if it's been about recognizing that something that you don't like, recognizing the people that you can or can't trust, the type of people that it is safe to share with versus those that it's not. All of that is an important part of the healing process. So when you're feeling those moments of being discouraged, feeling like it's too late, it's not. It's never too late. One of my favorite quotes by George Eliot, it's never too late to become what you might have been. Never. It doesn't matter how old you are. It doesn't matter how much work you've done or not done. I've worked with quite a few women over the years, and even a man, courageous man, who at 77 years old, I think, started therapy for the first time. But I've worked with a lot of people who don't start this process until into their 50s or 60s or even 70s. It's never too late, and everything that you've done has been an important part. So please don't feel that you've wasted time. Don't feel that it's too late. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Please share in the comments any thoughts, reactions that you felt or noticed coming up for you as you listened. Of course, if you found the video helpful, please give it a thumbs up to help other people find it too. And don't forget to subscribe. I'll look forward to seeing you next time.